James Hartley walked through the crowded auction house on station Kepler 7, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. Around him, thousands of beings from different planets and species moved through the massive hall, looking at ships that were being sold. Some ships were small and fast. Other ships were large and powerful. The air was filled with strange languages and the sounds of people talking and making deals. James was different from most buyers here. He did not have much money like the big trading companies or the military forces that came to these auctions. He was just a human, a salvage expert who bought old things and tried to fix them to make money. He had been doing this work for many years, and he knew how to see value in things that other people thought were worthless. His partner Eleanor Webb walked beside him, looking worried. Eleanor was smart and careful with money. She often told James when she thought his ideas were not good ideas. Today was no different. "James, I really do not think this is a good plan," she said, shaking her head. "We have spent so much money already. We cannot spend more on something that might not work." James did not answer right away. He kept walking toward a certain section of the auction house. Eleanor followed him, still talking about why they should not do this. Finally, they reached a large window that looked out into space. There, floating in the darkness, was a ship that was truly massive. The ship was called the Sovereign Dawn. It was old, very old. Nobody knew exactly how old it was, but the record said it was built by the Valerian Empire a very long time ago. The Valorians were an advanced species that had built many amazing things, but they had disappeared long ago. Now only their old things remained. The Sovereign Dawn was a galactic cruiser, which meant it was built to travel across the entire galaxy. It was about 2 kilometers long, which was enormous. The ship had many parts sticking out from its main body and large engines at the back. But the ship looked dead. Its lights were not on. There were no signs that anything inside was working. The hull had marks and damage from sitting in space for so long without being used. "That is the one," James said quietly, pointing at the ship. Eleanor made a small noise of surprise. "That ship. James, that ship is completely broken. Nobody even bothers to look at it. I heard people talking about it this morning. They said every major company that came to this auction already decided they do not want it. The Valerian Trade Collective did not even make an offer. The military forces from the 3 main governments walked past it without stopping." "I know," James said, and he was still looking at the ship with interest in his eyes. "So why do you want it?" Eleanor asked, frustrated. "What can possibly make that old, broken ship worth anything?" James turned to look at Eleanor. His face was calm and thoughtful. "Because everyone else thinks it is worthless. That is exactly why I want it." Eleanor did not understand this answer. She had heard James talk like this many times before, and it usually meant he was about to do something that made her nervous. "James, you cannot just buy ships because other people do not want them. That is not how business works. You need a real reason. You need to know what you can do with it." "I do have a reason," James said. He pointed back at the ship. "Look at the design. Look at how it was built. That is not just any ship design. That is Valerian technology. And look at the condition. Yes, it is old and damaged, but the basic structure is still strong. The bones of this ship are good. That means something. It means this ship was built to last. It means the Valorians knew what they were doing when they made it." Eleanor looked at the ship again, trying to see what James saw. She could see that the basic structure was strong, but that did not seem like enough reason to spend so much money. "James, even if the structure is good, we do not know what is inside. We do not know if the systems can be fixed. We do not know anything about how to work with Valerian technology. Nobody does anymore. The Valorians are gone." "That is what makes it interesting," James said. "That is what everyone thinks. But I have read some old research papers. I have talked to some people who study ancient technology. The Valorians left some information behind. Not a lot, but enough. And I think I can figure out the rest." The sun outside the window had started to move lower in the sky of the station. The light was changing, making the old ship look even more mysterious and distant. James watched it with an expression that Eleanor had seen many times before. When James looked at something like that, it meant he had already made a decision. It meant she could talk to him all day, but he would still do what he wanted to do. "When is the auction?" Eleanor asked, giving up on trying to talk him out of this. "In 1 hour," James replied. "The Sovereign Dawn is the last item they are selling today. Nobody is interested in it, so I think the price will be very low. Very, very low. That is when I will make my offer." Eleanor sighed. She knew she could not stop him. She had tried many times in the past to stop James from buying things that seemed like bad ideas, and he had always done it anyway. Sometimes it had worked out well. Sometimes it had not worked out well. But James always believed in his choices, and that was one of the things Eleanor liked about him, even when it made her worried. They walked to the auction floor and waited. Many ships were sold that day. Big ships. Small ships. Damaged ships. Ships that looked new. The prices went up and down. Some people got very excited and bid against each other for ships they really wanted. Other ships sold for very cheap because nobody was interested. Finally, the auctioneer called out the name, the Sovereign Dawn. The crowd was very small now. Most people had left after buying what they wanted or after deciding they did not want anything else. James and Eleanor stood in the back, waiting. "This is the Sovereign Dawn," the auctioneer said, his voice tired. "A galactic cruiser of unknown exact age, built by the Valerian civilization. The ship is non-functional and requires significant repair work. The opening bid is 3 million credits." Nobody raised their hand. 2 million credits, the auctioneer said, lowering the price. Still nothing. 1 million credits, the auctioneer said. Now he sounded like he just wanted to get this over with. James raised his hand. 500,000 credits, James offered before the auctioneer could even speak. The auctioneer looked surprised. He looked around the room. There was nobody else. Nobody wanted to bid against James. "Going once," the auctioneer said. "Going twice. Sold to the human buyer for 500,000 credits." The gavel came down with a loud sound. James Hartley was now the owner of the Sovereign Dawn. The galactic community would soon be laughing at the foolish human who had thrown away his money on space junk. 3 weeks had passed since James Hartley took ownership of the Sovereign Dawn. 3 weeks of hard work, long hours, and careful planning. He and Eleanor had gathered a small team of humans who knew how to work with old machines and broken technology. They had rented equipment and brought supplies to the ship. Now they were inside the massive vessel, trying to understand what they had bought. The inside of the ship was dark. The lights were not working, so James and Eleanor used portable lights that they carried with them. The beams from these lights cut through the darkness like knives, showing walls and hallways that had not seen any activity for hundreds of years. There was dust everywhere. The dust was thick and old, and it made Eleanor cough when she moved too quickly. "This place is huge," said David, one of the team members. He was walking next to Eleanor, pointing his light at the ceiling far above them. "I have never seen anything this big before. How many people could even fit inside here?" "Thousands," James said from ahead of them. "According to the old records I found, this ship could carry a crew of 500 people and supplies for a very long time. This is not just a ship for traveling. This is a ship built for exploring distant places and staying away from home for years." They walked deeper into the ship. The team had started at the top levels and was slowly working their way down. They checked each room carefully, looking at what was still there, what was broken, and what might still be useful. Most of the rooms were empty. Some had old equipment that was too damaged to fix. The team was beginning to wonder if James had made a terrible mistake after all. But Eleanor did not give up. She was curious by nature and she wanted to understand this ship. On the 3rd week, she decided to explore a part of the ship that the others had not looked at yet. It was a lower section, deeper inside the ship than anyone had gone before. The hallway was very narrow, and the walls seemed different from the other walls they had seen. These walls were made of a material that looked darker and stronger. Eleanor moved slowly down the hallway, her light moving from side to side. The air felt different here too. It was cooler. It felt like this part of the ship was somehow different from everything else. She came to a door. It was a very large door and it was closed. The surface of the door had markings on it. The markings were not in any language that Eleanor could read, but they were beautiful and complex. She recognized them immediately. These were Valerian markings. Eleanor called the others over the communication device that all the team members wore. "James, come here. I found something." When James arrived, he looked at the door for a long time without speaking. Eleanor could see that he was thinking very hard about something. Finally, he reached out and touched the markings on the door. "This is very old Valerian writing," James said slowly. "I have seen pictures of this before in the old research papers. This is a seal. This door is sealed. That means something important is behind this door. Can you open it?" Eleanor asked. James looked at the edges of the door. He could see that there was no lock on the outside. The door was sealed from the inside, which meant someone on the ship had sealed it deliberately many years ago. "Not easily," he said. "But I think I can try. Help me look for a control panel. There must be something that controls this door." They searched the area around the door. After about 30 minutes, David found something on the wall. It was a panel that looked different from the rest of the wall. Inside the panel were several buttons and switches. But everything looked inactive. There was no power running to it. "We need to get power to this," James said. Eleanor, go back to the main area. There should be a central power system. See if you can get any power flowing through this section of the ship. Eleanor left and James stayed with David. They waited for about an hour. Then very slowly the panel began to glow with a soft blue light. A sound came from the door. It was a very old sound, like something waking up after a very long sleep. The door began to move. It moved slowly, very slowly. Dust fell from the edges of the door as it opened. A cold wind came out from inside, carrying smells that were strange and old. As the door opened wider, James and David could see inside. There was a room and the room was full of things. In the center of the room were several objects that looked like crystals. They were large and clear, but they glowed with a soft light. The light was blue and green and it seemed alive somehow. These crystals were pulsing slowly, like a heart beating. What are those? David whispered. Data cores, James said, his voice full of wonder. Those are Valerian data cores. They hold information. They hold memories. They hold knowledge. James walked carefully into the room. He was very careful because he did not know if anything in here would still work or if it was all broken. He moved slowly toward the nearest crystal. As he got closer, the light from the crystal got brighter. It is responding to me, James said. It is reacting to my presence. That means it still has power. That means it is still active. He reached out and touched the crystal gently. The moment his hand touched it, the crystal suddenly glowed very brightly. Information started appearing all around the room. Images appeared on the walls. Text appeared in the air. All of it was in the Valerian language, but James could understand some of it. Eleanor, get back here now, James said into his communication device. When Eleanor arrived a few minutes later, she stopped in the doorway and stared at what was happening. The entire room was filled with information now. Images showed massive ships and battles. Text scrolled across the walls faster than anyone could read it. And underneath all of it there was fear. The information carried a sense of fear and danger. James, what is this? Eleanor asked, moving closer to him. This is why the Valorians sealed this room, James said, still reading the information appearing before them. This is a record. A complete record of something they discovered. Something that scared them so much that they hid it away and tried to forget about it. Eleanor read some of the text that she could understand. She saw words like danger, threat, and impossible to defeat. She saw images of something that was not like any ship or being she had ever seen before. It was something wrong. Something that should not exist. James, what did they find? She asked. James turned to look at Eleanor and his face was very serious. They found something from somewhere else. Something from outside our space. Something that should not be here. And Eleanor, I think they did not just find it. I think they fought it. I think they barely survived. The data core pulsed again and more information filled the room. James and Eleanor realized that they had found something far more important than a broken ship. They had found a secret that the Valerian Empire had hidden away long ago. A secret about a threat that no one in the galaxy knew about. A threat that was now waking up again. Within 5 days of Eleanor's discovery, representatives from the major galactic powers began arriving at Station Kepler 7. Word had spread somehow that James Hartley had found something important inside the old Valerian ship. Nobody knew exactly what he had found, but everyone wanted to know. Everyone wanted to see it. And most importantly, everyone wanted to own it. The first to arrive was a delegation from the Corvin Trade Collective. They were a species that looked like tall, thin beings with skin that shimmered like silver. Their leader was named Vex, and he came into James's temporary office on the station with a smile that did not look friendly. I represent the Corvin Trade Collective, Vex said, his voice smooth like oil. We have heard that you have discovered something of value inside your ship. We would like to make you an offer. A very generous offer. I have not decided what to do with what I found yet, James replied carefully. Then let me help you decide, Vex said. He placed a data crystal on the table between them. This represents a payment of 50 million credits. That is more money than you could make in 10 lifetimes. All you need to do is give us access to the ship and everything you have found. James looked at the crystal but did not touch it. I need time to think about it. Vex's smile disappeared. You have 1 day. After that, this offer goes away forever. He stood up and left the office. But Vex was not alone in trying to get the ship. The next day, a military vessel from the Zenithian Council arrived. They sent down a representative named Commander Ruth. She did not make offers like Vex. She made demands. The Sovereign Dawn is a Valerian ship, Ruth said, standing in James's office with her hands on her hips. It is a historical artifact that belongs in a proper government facility. You are just a private citizen. You cannot possibly understand the importance of this discovery. The Zenithian Council is taking control of the ship immediately. You will be compensated fairly for your trouble. That is not going to happen, James said firmly. Ruth's face turned red with anger. Then we will take it by force. You have 24 hours to hand over the ship, or we will remove it ourselves. Within another day, 3 more groups arrived. A scientific organization called the Institute of Ancient Knowledge wanted to study the ship. A wealthy individual named Harrison offered James an impossible amount of money, enough to buy a small planet. And another military force, this one from a government that James had never even heard of before, arrived with weapons and threats. James realized that he had a serious problem. Everyone wanted his ship. Everyone thought they had the right to take it from him. He was just one human, and they were powerful organizations and governments. How could he possibly keep what was his? Eleanor found him sitting alone in his quarters that night, looking tired and worried. "We have a problem," he said to her. "Many problems," Eleanor agreed, sitting down next to him. "But I think I found something that might help." She showed him a file on her portable computer. It was a record from the Valerian data cores. It was written in simple language, not the complex Valerian scientific writing. It looked like it was meant to be a message, a warning, or maybe instructions for someone. "I have been studying the data cores," Eleanor said. "This particular message keeps repeating. It talks about the quantum core of the ship. The main engine. It says that the quantum core is special. It says that it can only be operated by beings with a very specific type of brain structure." "What does that mean?" James asked. "I think it means the Valorians built this ship in a very specific way," Eleanor said. "They built it so that only certain types of minds could control it. They did this, I think, as a protection. A way to make sure that only the right people could ever use this ship." James did not understand. "So what?" "So I tried something," Eleanor said. She pulled up another file showing test results. "I asked the computer to scan my brain, just to see if I could operate the ship. James, the results they are extraordinary. My brain structure is compatible with the Valerian systems. Not just compatible. Highly compatible. Better compatible than any other species should be. Better than the Valorians themselves, according to the computer." James looked at the results in shock. "That is not possible." "I know," Eleanor said. "But it is true. The computer thinks that human brains are somehow perfectly designed to work with Valerian technology. And there is more. I had the computer test some of the other humans on our team. The results are the same. Every single human has better neural compatibility with this system than any other species." James began to understand. His mind started putting pieces together. "You are saying that humans can operate this ship better than anyone else? Better than the Valorians who built it?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "The computer cannot explain why. But that is what the data shows. It is like the Valorians designed this ship for a species that they had never even met before. A species that would come later. A species that would have brains that could perfectly interface with their technology." James stood up and walked to the window. Outside he could see the Sovereign Dawn floating in space. He could also see the military vessels and the other ships from the different groups that wanted his ship. He could see the situation he was in. Then he smiled. "Call a meeting," he said to Eleanor. "Call all of them. Every group that has come to threaten me or buy me out. I want to show them something." Eleanor looked confused. "James, what are you doing?" "I am showing them that they need me more than I need them," James said. The next day, all the representatives gathered in a large conference room on Station Kepler 7. Vex from the Corvin Trade Collective was there. Commander Ruth from the Zenithian Council was there. The scientists from the Institute of Ancient Knowledge were there. Everyone was there, and they were all angry because they had been forced to wait while James prepared something. James stood in front of them with Eleanor beside him. "I want to show you something," he said. He played a recording that Eleanor had made. The recording showed the inside of the Sovereign Dawn. It showed Eleanor connecting with the quantum core through a neural interface. It showed the massive main computer systems activating. It showed power flowing through the ship like blood flowing through veins. It showed the ship coming to life. The room went completely silent. "What you are seeing," James said calmly, "is something that no one in this room can do. Only humans can do this. Only our brains are compatible with Valerian technology. We did not know this until recently, but the Valorians designed their most advanced systems to work with human neurology. For centuries, this technology has been useless to everyone else. Useless until now." Vex leaned forward. "You are bluffing." "I am not," James said. Eleanor Webb is the first human to successfully interface with Valerian quantum systems. She can control this ship better than any being in this galaxy. And she is not alone. Every human on my team can do this. We have tested them all. Commander Ruth's face showed doubt and worry now. If what you say is true, then you must give this technology to the Zenithian Council for safekeeping. I am not giving anything to anyone, James said. But I am willing to cooperate with all of you. I am willing to share the knowledge. I am willing to work together. But it will be on equal terms. As partners. Not as someone taking things from someone weaker. The room filled with quiet conversations and murmuring. Bex looked angry. Ruth looked thoughtful. The scientist looked excited. James knew that everything had changed in that moment. Humanity had just become something that no one could ignore anymore. And he, James Hartley, was the one who had made it happen. 2 months had passed since James revealed humanity's unique ability to work with Valerian technology. In those 2 months, everything had changed. The major galactic powers had stopped fighting over the Sovereign Dawn and had started working together instead. Scientists from different species came to study the ship. Military strategists began planning how to use it. Trade organizations negotiated agreements. Humanity, once ignored and dismissed, was now at the center of everything. Eleanor had become the primary operator of the ship's quantum core. She spent hours every day connected to the ancient Valerian systems, learning how they worked, understanding their capabilities. The more she learned, the more she realized how advanced the technology actually was. The Valorians had created something truly extraordinary, something that was years and years ahead of anything else in the galaxy. But there was a problem that nobody had thought about carefully until now. Eleanor was in the main control room of the Sovereign Dawn when she felt something strange. It was not a physical feeling. It was something in the quantum systems themselves. Something in the ancient code that had been dormant for centuries. James, she said into her communication device, her voice tense. Something is happening. I'm not sure what, but something is waking up in the system. James was on station Kepler 7, in a meeting with representatives from the Corvin Trade Collective. He excused himself immediately and rushed to the ship. When he arrived at the control room, Eleanor was still connected to the quantum core, her eyes closed, her hands resting on the interface panel. What is happening? James asked, moving to her side. There is a signal, Eleanor said, her voice strange and distant. It is an automated message. It has been waiting in the quantum core for a very long time. It is activating now because we restarted the systems. It is like an alarm. A warning alarm. A warning about what? James asked. Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at James with fear in her expression. About the thing they sealed away. The thing they were hiding from. The message says that we have reactivated the beacon. We have sent a signal out into space. We have told it that we are here. James felt cold. Told what? Told what that we are here. Before Eleanor could answer, alarms started going off all over the ship. Red lights flashed in the control room. Screens filled with strange symbols and readings that James could not understand. But he could see that something was very wrong. Get me the main observation deck, James commanded. They ran through the corridors of the Sovereign Dawn until they reached a large window that looked out into space. What they saw made both of them stop and stare in shock. Space itself was tearing. It was not a gradual thing. It was not something that happened slowly. Right in front of them, the normal fabric of space was splitting open like a wound. And through that wound, something was coming. Something that was not like any ship or machine they had ever seen. It was a shape that hurt to look at. It was a color that should not exist. It was something wrong, something that did not belong to this dimension or this universe. Oh my God, Eleanor whispered. James did not waste time. He ran to the communication system and activated it. All stations, all ships, this is James Hartley commanding the Sovereign Dawn. We have a major situation developing. There is an unidentified object entering our space. All military vessels are to take defensive positions immediately. The response was chaos. Different species started shouting in different languages. Orders and counter-orders were given. Military ships began moving into position. But everyone could see what was happening in space. Everyone could see the thing that was emerging. It moved slowly at first like it was pushing through resistance. The edges of space around it glowed with light that was not natural. Stars in the background seemed to distort and bend around it. And as it pushed further through, more and more of it became visible. It was truly enormous. It was bigger than any ship, bigger than any space station, bigger than anything any being in the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Ruth's voice came through the communication system. What is that thing? Does anyone have identification? It matches the descriptions in the Valerian data, James said, pulling up the ancient records on his screen. It matches what they recorded in their sealed message. This is the threat they were hiding from. This is what they tried to seal away and forget about. A scientist named Dr. Patterson, who worked for the Institute of Ancient Knowledge, was also listening. According to the records you found, he said, his voice shaking, the Valorians fought this thing with their entire military force. It took them years to contain it. And in the end they barely succeeded. They barely survived. So what are you saying? Ruth demanded. Are you saying we cannot fight this thing? I am saying, Dr. Patterson replied slowly, that we should not have to. This thing should have stayed sealed. It should have stayed locked away. But we reactivated the beacon. We woke it up. We brought it here. The blame in those words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Everyone was looking at James now. James had reactivated the ship. James had brought back the warning beacon. James had done this. We did not know, Eleanor said, her voice strong and angry. Nobody told us what would happen. The Valorians left the information sealed away. They did not leave clear warnings. They just hid it. But there was no time for arguments now. The thing had fully emerged from the Terran space. It was hovering above the station, above the ships, above everything. It seemed to be looking at them, though it had no eyes that anyone could see. Then it moved. It was fast, faster than anything that large should be able to move. One of the military ships tried to fire weapons at it, but the weapons did nothing. The ship's lasers and missiles passed through the thing like it was not even there. The thing reached down toward the military ship, and the ship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Simply gone like it had never been there at all. Panic filled the communication channels. All units retreat. Ruth screamed. Fall back to defensive positions. Get civilians away from the station. But there was nowhere to retreat to. The thing was too big, too fast. It was spreading out and space was tearing open in multiple places now. More of these creatures, or more of this same creature, was pushing through from whatever dimension it came from. James looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked back at him. They both realized the same thing at the same moment. The Valorians had recorded how to fight this thing. They had recorded their strategy. They had recorded the method they used to seal it away. But they had also recorded something else. They had recorded that the solution would require someone who could operate the Sovereign Dawn's full power. Someone with a brain that could interface with the quantum systems. Someone like Eleanor. We have to do something, James said. We have to try. Eleanor nodded. She was already moving back toward the main control room. Behind them, space continued to tear open, and the things from another dimension continued to come through, bringing with them a threat that no one in this galaxy had ever faced before and had hoped never to face again. Eleanor sat in the command center of the Sovereign Dawn, her consciousness partially merged with the ship's quantum systems. The connection was stronger now than it had ever been before. She could feel the ship like it was her own body. She could sense every system, every circuit, every piece of ancient Valerian technology working together as one unified whole. Around her, screens showed the battle that was happening outside in space. The creatures from the other dimension were attacking everything. They were destroying ships. They were tearing apart the station. Military forces from a dozen different species were firing weapons that did not work, launching attacks that had no effect. The creatures moved through space like they owned it, like the normal laws of physics did not apply to them. James stood beside Eleanor, his hands on the control panel, coordinating with all the different military forces outside. Eleanor, we need you to do something, he said urgently. We need you to activate the Valerian Defense Protocol. The one described in the data. Can you do it? I am trying, Eleanor said, her voice distant and strange. She was not just speaking. She was thinking with the computer. She was becoming one with it. The systems are very complex. I have to understand how they work first. I cannot just activate something I do not understand. It could destroy the ship. It could destroy us. We do not have much time, James said. He was watching the screens. Another ship had just been destroyed by one of the creatures. Thousands of beings had just died. Eleanor pushed deeper into the quantum systems. The Valerian data was there, organized in ways that her human brain could somehow understand perfectly. It was like the Valorians had designed their entire system specifically for human minds to eventually discover and use. She found the defense protocol. It was complex beyond measure. It involved calculations and operations that should have been impossible. But as she looked at it, as she understood it, she realized something strange. The defense protocol was not actually that complicated. It was elegant. It was beautiful in its simplicity once you understood the base principles. I have it, Eleanor said suddenly. I understand it now. It is a resonance field. The Valorians discovered that these creatures exist partially in our dimension and partially in another dimension. They cannot be fully destroyed because they are never fully in one place. But they can be pushed back. They can be forced back through the dimensional tear if you create a resonance field that makes their presence in our dimension unstable. Can you create that field? James asked. Yes, Eleanor said. But I need help. I need the ship's quantum core to be at full power. I need every system operating at maximum capacity. And I need someone to help me coordinate the field. I cannot do this alone. James looked around at the control room. His team was there. David was there. Several other humans and even a few alien scientists were standing at their stations, ready to help. We are here, James said. Tell us what to do. Eleanor began giving instructions. Every person in the control room moved into action. They activated systems that had been dormant for centuries. They rerouted power through ancient circuits. They prepared the Sovereign Dawn for something it had not done in thousands of years. The ship began to glow. The light was blue and green, the same colors as the data cores in the sealed room. Outside, the creatures seemed to sense what was happening. They turned their attention toward the Sovereign Dawn. Some of them started moving toward the ship, approaching it with what seemed like hunger or anger or both. Eleanor, they are coming toward us, James said. I know, Eleanor replied. Let them come. The resonance field needs to be active before they reach us. It needs to be centered on this ship. It needs to use the ship as its source. The field activated. It was not something that could be seen, not exactly. But everyone on every ship and station could feel it. It was like a vibration in reality itself. It was like the universe was humming at a frequency that was just barely at the edge of what living things could perceive. The creatures froze in space. They seemed confused. They seemed disturbed by this new vibration. Then the field started pushing. It was not a physical push. It was a dimensional push. The creatures began to fade from normal space. Their forms became less solid, less real. They were being forced back into the dimension they came from. One by one, they retreated back through the dimensional tear that they had created. But one of the creatures resisted. It was larger than the others and it seemed more powerful. It pushed against the resonance field with all its force. The field wavered. The Sovereign Dawn shook. Alarms started going off in the control room. Eleanor, the field is destabilizing, David called out. Eleanor felt it too. The connection between her mind and the ship's systems was becoming strained. The dimensional physics were fighting against the resonance field. It was like two massive forces were colliding and she was caught between them. I need more power, Eleanor said through gritted teeth. I need everything. Every last bit of power in this ship. If we give you everything, the ship's systems will fail, James said. You will not have enough power to maintain the field. The creatures will come back. I know, Eleanor said. But I also know that I can do this. I know that human brains are designed for this. I know that I am capable of more than I thought. Let me try, James. Let me push harder. James made his decision instantly. Give her everything, he commanded. The power surge was immediate. The entire Sovereign Dawn blazed with light so bright that people on nearby stations had to shield their eyes. Eleanor's consciousness expanded. She could feel the entire quantum core. She could feel every system. She could feel the very fabric of space bending and twisting around the ship. And she pushed back against the largest creature with all her will. The creature resisted for a moment longer. Then it yielded. It retreated back through the dimensional tear like all the others. Eleanor pushed the field outward, forcing the tear itself to close, sealing it, locking it, making sure that nothing else could come through. Then it was over. Space returned to normal. The vibration in reality faded away. The Sovereign Dawn's lights dimmed as the power surge ended. Eleanor's consciousness separated from the quantum core, and she collapsed back in her chair, breathing hard. James caught her before she fell. Are you okay? He asked, his voice full of worry. I am alive, Eleanor said weakly. The field worked. It worked perfectly. Outside, an enormous silence had fallen over the galaxy. All the military ships were still there. All the space stations were still there. But the creatures were gone. The threat had been eliminated. Then communication started coming in from every direction. Messages of gratitude. Messages of amazement. Messages asking how humanity had done what an entire galactic alliance could not do. James helped Eleanor to her feet. Together they walked to the observation window and looked out at space. The Sovereign Dawn was still there, still gleaming, still filled with ancient Valerian technology that had just saved the entire galaxy. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Humanity was no longer dismissed as primitives. They were recognized as essential. Trade agreements poured in. Alliances were formed. New partnerships were created. The Institute of Ancient Knowledge offered Eleanor a position as the head of their research division. The Corvin Trade Collective offered James a seat on their ruling council. Every major power in the galaxy wanted humanity to be part of their organization. But James and Eleanor had other plans. They decided to use the Sovereign Dawn to explore the galaxy, to seek out new knowledge, to help other civilizations discover the potential that was hidden inside them. Eleanor became the captain of the Sovereign Dawn, the first human captain of a Valerian galactic cruiser. James became her first officer and strategic advisor. 3 months after the creatures had been defeated, Eleanor and James stood together on the bridge of the Sovereign Dawn, preparing for their first long journey. The ship hummed around them, alive and ready. Behind them, humanity's role in the galaxy was forever changed. Ahead of them, infinite possibilities stretched out across the stars. Was it worth it? Eleanor asked James, the same question she had asked him months ago when they had first taken ownership of the ship. James looked at Eleanor, then at the controls of the Sovereign Dawn, then out at the stars beyond. He thought about the worthless ship he had bought at auction. He thought about how everyone had laughed at him. He thought about how everything had changed. Every single credit, he said, smiling. And so much more. The Sovereign Dawn activated its engines and jumped into hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes of all humanity, the knowledge of the ancients, and the promise of a future that no one could have predicted. The galactic community watched humanity rise from obscurity to prominence in just a few months. They watched a species that had been ignored become essential. They watched as James Hartley, the man who bought a ship that nobody wanted, became a hero and a legend. It was truly a transformation that would shock anyone,